Sometimes it's been called pure mind, original mind, beginner's mind. There's been different names kind of giving to this kind of state of mind that we're working on becoming more familiar with in this practice. So that's really important to kind of keep in mind, because most of us are on some pretty heavy-duty projects, and the project it's the me project. I'm trying to fix something. I'm trying to develop something. I'm going to be happy when. And then, so we kind of keep living our lives, and we keep kind of putting off our happiness until something else happens. And then hopefully at some point, maybe like this week or right now, we kind of wake up to the fact that the only authentic opportunity to be happy is in this moment. If we keep kind of putting it off, it's just not going to happen. So with that in mind, so we talked about the story of the Buddha, the legend, the hero's journey, and so as soon as the Buddha became awakened and became enlightened, his first Dharma talk was on the Four Noble Truths. So the first thing that the topic that he was going to handle is just what I'm going to talk about today, and it was called dukkha, or suffering. And if we kind of go around and we ask people on the streets, like, are you suffering? Most people are going to say, no, I'm not suffering. So there's a little bit lost in translation. If we go around and we ask people, hey, are you stressed out? Most people are going to say yes. If they're really honest with themselves, if we say, are you at ease? No. Are you content? Sometimes. So there's this kind of this idea that kind of something's not right, and something's been left kind of undone. And when because the main practice within this approach is to actually sit in meditation and to be still and to pay attention. My first time that I did this stuff, I realized that I had anxiety, that I was uneasy, kind of right from the get-go. I was like, wow, how long has this been going on? And as I went kind of further into investigating it and kind of got a little hooked by the practice, I started to realize that much of my life and much of my behaviors, much of what came out of my mouth, much of my insecurities, there's so many things that kind of came from this kind of state of not being at ease. And so that was a kind of pretty profound realization. It's a bit of a kind of party pooper kind of first teaching, isn't it? Like, life is stressful, it's suffering, and it's not as much that life is suffering or stress, but there's an element to life that this is going to happen. And if we go back to the story of the Buddha, it's all, he sees an old man, and everybody in the room has people that are, older in their life that are kind of failing. Everybody in the room has had somebody in their life die. There's nothing fun about that. And we've all kind of dealt with somebody in our life that had disease, that was struggling, maybe with cancer or some disease that was really kind of taking away maybe any chance that they had of being happy because of the intense suffering. So when we look at this kind of first noble truth, the more that we can kind of come to this realization that these things are going to happen, and also kind of take a look at our own life and just see, well, how much of this is going on within my life, then it really becomes the motivation to practice. We can look at micro levels and macro levels. Micro being like the day and how our days kind of go, from when we get out of bed to when we go to bed, and everything from getting stuck in traffic to uncooperative children, to people that don't, kind of see our way maybe at work, to our, going out for lunch, and the lunch line is really long and we've got to get back to work. So whatever it is, it's like throughout our day we can also see that we continually are getting challenged with these different points where we can start getting upset, or we can get stressed out, or we can fall into this state of unease. Most of how we relate when these kind of things come up are pretty unconscious reactions. We react pretty quickly to kind of what's going on, and for me, I know when I'm in this kind of living, or in this First Noble Truth, when I'm starting to kind of feel like I want to kind of pull away from it. Or I want to kind of separate from it. So, there's a certain sense of, as you're kind of on this path and you're moving along, that you start to pay attention to these moments that arise where you're like, okay, I don't want to be here. I really want to pull out. And then we're also, again, just starting to separate from our experience. And as we're kind of separating from our experience, there can tend to be a fair amount of suppression and avoidance, and that we can kind of go through in this process of experiencing this state. How do most of us? I really think that a lot of this stuff was almost created for the 21st century. Because never has there been a time when we've really had to deal with this level of speed, this level of greed, this level of materialism, and then throwing technology on top of it is like gasoline on the fire. So I notice when I'm driving in my car, and I've been working on making it a practice, that it's rare these days that you pull up to a light that everybody doesn't have their head down in a device. It's pretty rare that when you're kind of walking around that people don't have their head down in a device. It's pretty rare that you're not standing in line at brouhaha waiting for a sandwich, and no longer can people just stand there and just kind of be present, but they have to pull the device out and see if they can do more instead of just kind of just being present. So, we can see that as you kind of, again, start to pay attention, there's lots of different ways that will start to kind of mask this First Noble Truth. Everything from technology to, overeating to over-drinking to over fill in the blank. Anything to kind of numb it out and to dull it out. And one of the things that I've learned is when you through the kind of meditation practice and learning paying attention, is you're just learning to kind of notice when these kind of moments in your life arise. And then it's kind of like a yellow light. So we're kind of meant to slow down and then stop. Most of us, though, when we see the yellow light, we speed up. And we go faster, so we don't have to stop to deal with it. So it's often said in Buddhist philosophy, that a Buddhist will stop, for suffering. Just kind of put the brakes on and just try to get familiar with kind of what's going on, and can we kind of feel into what's happening and see what the kind of root is of this feeling of unease, whatever it may be. And getting back to the 21st century, I think that the easiest thing to do is just to ignore it. Right? So if we kind of keep ignoring these points where we could stop and get in touch, if we kind of ignore it, then we're just going to kind of keep pushing it down. And what happens is I think everybody here can bring to mind a part of their life where they knew something, they were kind of unease with something, and they were aware of it, but they kind of ignored it. And then we kind of think to ourselves, well, maybe it'll get better. So we have a lot of hope. Maybe it'll get better. But it doesn't get any better. And in essence, it actually gets worse. And it builds, and it builds, and it builds. And then what happens is the conditioning eventually meets a circumstance. And then the karma kind of flowers. And when it flowers, it's not just the person who's the receiver of it. It's also the people that's in their life and that's around them. So then what will happen is it's either addressed, so we kind of either stop and address it, or it kind of goes back under again. And then it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, and then it flowers again. And then it flowers again, the fallout's even bigger. So you could probably think of something in your life where you kind of knew something was going on. You kind of had a sneaky suspicion. You kind of kept ignoring it, and you ignored it, and you ignored it, and it flowered. And then didn't deal with it, and then it kept going, and then it kept getting bigger until it was dealt with. So there's this part of this practice that involves us learning to stop and to kind of deal with kind of what's going on, instead of thinking that somehow it's going to solve its own problem. The three ways that this noble truth kind of shows itself is pain. So the first one is kind of like physical pain. So maybe pain in the body. Something happens within your body, whether you hit yourself with a hammer or you kind of bang up your knee doing something. But there's pain. And typically, that can be kind of pretty impermanent. It can be short-lived. Something can heal. It can get fixed. The second way is change. So running a business, I always find it, especially a yoga business, where we're supposed to be like masters of change. Nobody likes the change. Nobody likes anything to change. So people, as things kind of change, people they hold on to the way things used to be instead of the way things are going. So this also can create a lot of stress and unease, because people, we can tend to resist change. And then the third way that it arises is just, plain and simple existence. As we kind of go deeper into our own existence, and as in the thing that the recording that I played yesterday a couple times was, we're born, we don't know where we come from, we can think, we can feel, we can experience, and then we don't necessarily know where we're going. We can have some great ideas, we could have maybe faith, but at the end of the day, we really don't know where we're going. So if we kind of start to wake up at all to our lives, at some point we start to contemplate, at some point this is going to be over, and what's going to happen? So there can be some kind of unease that kind of rests underneath the radar that will kind of come up from time to time. This is an inconvenient truth. It's very kind of inconvenient.